All right, looking at number 2 from 12.1, it says find the restricted values for x or for the rational expression. It might not always be x, but I think all the examples I have here have x as the variable. So find the restricted value for the rational expression. And we talked about before that some of the things you can't do in mathematics are to lead to an undefined answer. One of them is to divide by 0. So we can find the restricted values here by taking this denominator here. We can just ignore the numerator. We just want to take the denominator and we want to set the denominator equal to 0. Now some people will do that just right next to it right here. And some people will copy it down onto a different line, but I can set it equal to 0 right here, and then I'll solve that by dividing by 28, and you're probably getting pretty good at these. If I divide by 28 here, I get x equals 0, and that tells me that that's the restriction. So we would say x cannot equal 0, or we would say 0 is the restriction. Because if we inserted that value, in for x, it would cause an undefined result, okay? So taking a look at the next one, we can just set the bottom, the denominator, equal to 0. And then we can add 1 to both sides, and you probably already are done with it by the time I change the color of my pen here. But I'll add 1, I get x equals 1. And so remember, we can say the restrictions are 1 is the restriction, 1 is the restriction. Sometimes you get more restrictions than just 1, but we'll see that. Or you can say x cannot equal 1. All right, either way. All right. Sometimes it'll say separate multiple answers with a comma. All right. So here we can look at C and we set the denominator equal to 0. Now this we spot the squared on, and we learned in the previous chapter that to solve this we would have to factor. Okay, so we're going to factor out a 7x, and if I pull a 7x out front, it looks like this: 7x x minus 1 equals 0. And then from last chapter, we know that we can use the zero product property. 7x equals 0, x minus 1 equals 0. So we're going to get two answers here. And again, you're probably getting pretty quick at the solving at this point. Here we get x equals 0. And then we can add 1 on this next one. Okay, and we get x equals 1. So we get two restrictions. We could say the restrictions are, sorry about that. The restrictions are 0, comma 1. All right. So let's look at a few more. We're going to change the sheet here for us. We got 3 more of these that we're going to take a look at. Might even add a 4th one in that isn't on the worksheet. So again, for D, we're going to take the denominator and we're going to set it equal to 0. I spot the squared on there, so I'm thinking, okay, I got to factor this. I'm going to factor this into x plus 14, x minus 14, recognizing that it's the difference of squares. So this one leads me to x equals negative 14. This one leads me to x equals 14. Then doing the little shortcut there of the zero product property. And so x cannot equal negative 14, comma 14. Right? Two restrictions. Looking at E here. Again, I see that it has a square, so I'm going to factor. And if you're not good at factoring, hopefully you're going to get better at it soon. But it makes it a little more difficult if it takes you a while to factor it. I'm pretty good because I've done about 10,000 of them. So I factored this. Using the longer method this time, I'll set this piece equal to 0 and set this piece equal to 0. Remember, if you're good at the shortcut, you could probably finish that a little quicker. But I'm solving these two equations here. I get x equals -4, x equals 2, and therefore x cannot equal -4 or 2. Because remember, if we put those values in here, that would cause a 0, and we can't divide by 0. Okay? And then looking at f here, we'll set the bottom equal to 0. And then as hard as you try here, you can't factor this. Okay? And what you'll find out is that if you put a positive number in here for x squared, you would get a positive on the bottom. If you put a negative number in here, negative number squared is positive, you still get a positive in the denominator. And even if you put 0 in here, you'd still get a positive number in the denominator. So it's always a positive number in the denominator. You can never make this equal 0. So there's no restrictions. Okay, and on that thought, I want to just show you one that you might get. You might get something that looks like this. Say that's your numerator, and then you just have it over a plain old number like 5. Okay, and it asks for the restrictions. Well, if that's the case, when you think about this, okay, set the bottom equal to 0. That just leads to a contradictory statement, okay? It's a contradiction. So it's not even, you can't even solve that. It's just a contradiction. So in that case, we would also say no restrictions. Okay. So remember, just kind of set the denominator equal to 0 and solve, and that will find you the values that x cannot be. All right. All right. Thanks a lot. We'll look at some simplifying rational expressions next.